Okay, so I came to this hive today and I lifted up the top box and saw that there were charged queen cells. One of them is actually capped, and there's a few of them with royal jelly and young larvae in it. So this hive is in a swarm mode. So it's a good opportunity to make a video on how to manage your swarms. Your first priority is going to be to get the old queen out. Remember, no queen, no swarm. That is the priority. There's a lot of different ways to manage your swarms once they're in the swarm situation. This is just the way I do it. Just kind of go over what I'm going to do before I show you while I'm preparing all this. Is I'm basically going to pull the queen and make a decent 5-frame nuke out of her. That is basically an artificial swarm. It's going to make them think that they already swarmed, and then the host hive will be left with the swarm cells. And I'm going to leave 2 swarm cells and destroy the rest. The first task is going to be finding the queen. This is going to be a long video because it takes a little while, but I'll fast forward through some of the boring stuff. Finding a queen, it's tricky, it's intimidating. Eventually, you know, the more you do it, the more you find, the better you will get at it. When I started out, I try not to take a guess at what frame she's on, because then you tend to just kind of blow past the non-typical frame that a queen would be on. But as you get better, you will kind of get a sense as to where she is. I know that whenever I pull my boxes apart, if one box is angry and one is like really calm, there's a good chance she's in that. But in this situation where I absolutely have to find the queen, I treat every frame as if she's on that frame. Whenever you pull a frame away, try to, and if you have a side, like you could get to the side of your hive like I am right now, try to take a glance at that frame as you're pulling this out. Sometimes she'll kind of stick out at that angle, and before she can go and hide anywhere, sometimes you'll catch her on that frame. I don't think the hive already swarmed out, despite there being a capped swarm cell in this top box already, because the population is just too, it's too great. You know, I just don't feel like this hive swarmed, and I'm coming across some eggs. When a queen goes to swarm, they're gonna deprive her of some food, get her to slim down so she can fly. So if you got eggs in there, there's a good chance she's still in there. So, but you know, the eggs being present plus this good population, I'm gonna guess that she's still in here, and I'm not gonna stop until I find her. If she did start slimming down, that gets a little tricky, because, well, obviously she'll be harder to find. It's frustrating that it's in a swarm mode because these 2 frames I just pulled are empty drawn comb. Shame on me, possibly, because maybe if I got here a little sooner, before the mode started, I could have pulled those frames up top Then again, maybe not. Sometimes you could do everything possible to try to prevent swarming, and it still may happen. So the bottom box, there's nothing, no queen in the bottom box. We're still gonna come back to this box because I may harvest some frames out of here for our nuke that we're going to build when I do find that queen. A couple frames back just so that, you know, we can keep track of everything. I always like to pull my boxes apart when I have to find a queen, because if you leave the top box on, pull a couple frames, and, you know, she might be in the top box and then head down. Then you go past those frames and inspect, and she comes right back up on the other side. So I always pull my boxes apart. Now we'll check out this hive body, rather. This is the top. I like to push my frames over as far as I can without breaking the box. Give yourself some room just in case. It's not likely she's on an outside frame, but I never like to take that for granted. So give myself some room. So this frame is a really good, it's got some capped honey, some open nectar, and pollen. So right off the bat, I'm going to throw this frame into my nuke and start building my nuke out of this. I'm looking really good for a queen on this one, particularly because we don't want to go looking for a queen and then I actually had her in that nuke box the whole time. I don't think she's here. Oh, I see a mite on that bee. So I'm going to have to monitor the mite situation. If you see one mite, there's probably a lot. I don't know. Oh, it's gone. Trust me, there was a mite on one of the bees. Okay, so this is just going to go over to a nuke box. There's my nuke box right there set up. I already had that set up and ready to go because I suspected that there was going to be some swarming situations going on here. There's actually a beautifully capped queen cell right there. See your capped queen cell right there. I'm actually going to protect this. Put that queen cell in a box. I have it elevated so that the queen cell doesn't get damaged. So I put the frame with that queen cell right in there, right off the bat. Since that's a capped queen cell and it looked pretty nice, I'm putting it in that box. I'm still being gentle with these frames, even though I found, here's another queen cell that's almost capped. A couple more days and it'll be capped. We're going to be really careful because we're still going to select another frame with a queen cell on it. This might very well be it. I don't know, but I'm going to put it back in the box. If you'll notice, this box is propped up on the underside of an outer cover. The reason I do that is because it gives clearance for the queen cells. Remember, they hang down off of the bottom of the frame, so they can get damaged. A couple of them got damaged when I lifted the box to check. Sign of a swarm cell. You can't just go by Oh, it's on the bottom of the frame. It's a swarm cell. Yeah, that's typical. It's a tendency for them to be there, but you have to follow all the other symptoms. Tons of drone brood. Like here we got big patches of drone brood that normally wouldn't be on the face there, and I had a couple frames I came across like that already. So there's an excessive amount of drone brood. That's a good sign. And also when it comes to the queen cells, if they're in various stages, like some are capped, some are close to being capped, some are just formed, that's actually a pretty good sign that they're swarm cells. They make them at all different ages and stages, and I think that's by design to improve their chances of propagating their hive. Don't quote me on the reason why. I think I read that someplace. It makes sense to me. Okay, so I came back to this hive. I couldn't find the queen in the other box. I came back here, and sure enough, I saw her on this frame. Oh no, it was on this frame. Where'd she go? There she is. Let's see if we can get this on camera. She's right there. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but there's the queen. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to check this frame really good for queen cells, because we do not want to put a queen cell in our nuke. There's no queen cells on here. So we take this frame, spin our old camera around here, and we're going to drop her right in the center. And we already have a decent frame with the brood, I'm sorry, the pollen, open nectar, and some capped honey. Now that we have the queen isolated, we can really breathe easy now. Now, the rest of this is pretty easy. We're basically going to work on building our nuke. So what does she need in that nuke? You need the queen, you need 0 queen cells, you need resources, pollen, nectar, honey. We have a little bit. I wouldn't mind finding another frame with some resources on it. And now we have to go through all of the frames anyway, to make sure there's no additional queen cells. Remember, we want to leave 2, maybe 3. We have that one real nice one in that box over there. So now I'm going through here, and at this point you could shake them. You could shake the frames off, so just to do a better inspection. Those queen cells, man, when there's bees all over them, they're hard to see, and you don't want to miss any. You're going to have a second opportunity to tear out queen cells. The next thing we want to give that nuke that we're building is some capped brood. I'm not shaking this one off. I'm going to take this frame with capped brood, because I'm getting a pretty good view on there. I don't see any capped queen cells or queen cells being made. I want the nurse bees, I want the capped brood. This is going to go in our nuke box. The other thing I like to give them is one drawn empty comb. That's just room for her to lay. We don't want that nuke to get too crowded and and have it just be in the same condition as the host hive was. So we got this nice undrawn frame. And I'm going to put it right next to the frame that she's on. Now we go back to shaking frames. The likelihood of finding swarm cells is not as great in the bottom box as the top box, but they are there. In fact, when I was going through this box before, I saw one. And, well, if you remember, this queen cell that we took out and put in that box goes from down here as well. That's why you don't guess at where things are, where things typically are, and treat that as an absolute. There are no absolutes in beekeeping. These are just empty comb. I want them to end up being up in the top box because they're actually nice comb. So when this does become queen right in 21 to 25 days, there will be the nice comb up top for them to draw out on. And this is a good time to just kind of organize that. So now we know that we want this frame with that awesome queen cell, but there's also some queen cells I'm not crazy about. That one got damaged, we don't want that. This guy right here got damaged. You know what? They're making a queen cell right next to it. I like to have queen cells next to each other, the two that I choose. And this is going to be our frame. Nice queen cell right there. We got one as a backup getting made. For every queen cell, there's a potential for another after swarm. So I put her in the bottom box. I do that so that when I come back here in 6 days or so, I know that I treat this frame with kid gloves. And I'm going to make a mark on the frame just so I know. And the reason why I want them on the bottom box is because if they draw out any cells up top anymore, one that you missed maybe, you don't want them to fuse it to the bottom, and then when you pick that box up or take that frame out, it's going to destroy your cell. So I kind of want to button up this bottom box just to get it done. I'm choosing certain frames that I want in the bottom box and the top box. Those are things that I've just over the years kind of preferred. I'm not going to explain the why of what I'm doing because it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. You know, it's just my way of doing it, and you're going to come up with your own preferences. This is all pollen. This is solid pollen. I kind of want this in the nuke. So that first frame that I put in the nuke that had capped honey, open larva, and pollen, I actually took out. I'm going to put it back in the host hive. Because we just put a whole frame of pollen in there. And I know that this box has a solid frame of honey. And I want this to go to my nuke. Remember, that's all nurse bees in there. The foraging force is going to be low. So I want this in here. Just checking for swarm cells. We already have our 2 queen cells that we want down below. So anything else you're going to tear out. Here's some brood. Now check check this out. What I'm going to do now is take this frame of nurse bees. We know the queen's in that box already. We have her accounted for. So I'll take all these nurse bees and just give a shape to build that population, give them some more bees. Now everything's kind of coming together now, kind of getting everything the way I want it. We're putting all the brood up top together. It's a food frame, it's a partially drawn frame, it's an empty frame. Brood, brood, brood. This is all brood. Keep the brood towards the center. All the stores to the outside. Empty frames inside of that. Now I have to get these bees have nothing better to do now but to work. There's no brood that's going to be raised. So this hive wasn't terribly strong. I don't know why it was in a swarm mode. It may actually be a supersedure disguised as a swarm. Who knows? So that being said, I don't want to break up too much of the brood nest. I am going to throw, I'm going to find a very populated 2 frames and sneak this guy right between them. If this was a really booming hive with tons of brood, I would sneak a couple more in between. I don't like going every other frame and just checkerboarding. I don't like breaking the brood nest up that much, regardless of time of year. So top box is done. Remember, we got our queen cells right there, so we don't want to touch those frames too much. This is brood, and then we put some partially drawn frame and a partially drawn frame. That's a pretty well populated brood frame, those 2. So same thing, I'm going to sneak this undrawn foundation right in there. Boom. This hive is done, and we're going to have a little discussion about the next step. Put a super on this, but this early in the season is let them build up, because this hive was set back a little bit. I don't really know why it was in a swarm mode. I'm starting to think I don't know. Sometimes I think swarming and supersedures, I feel like sometimes they act like a swarm and it's actually a supersedure that was their motivation. This hive had brood. It's actually one of my weaker hives. So now, since there's eggs and young larvae in this hive, they can go ahead and make emergency cells. Every queen cell is a potential for a swarm. So now we have our 2 choice cells that we put in the bottom box and protected. But now in about 6 days, because they can make a queen cell out of a young larva, and there's an egg for 3 days and then young larva, so I give it about a 6th day as a cushion. So on day 6 you want to go back in and keep your original cells that you chose in the bottom protected, and go through that hive and tear out any other cells that they may have made. That's how I do it. I don't, I have had a couple hives swarm out. They'll literally swarm themselves to death. I'm not saying that happens every time, but if there's a chance of it happening, I want to avoid it. So that's why I do it the way I do it. Your 2 choice cells down below, tear everything else out, come back 6 days later and tear anything else out. Here's our nuke that we pulled. So we have the queen in there. We have a full frame of pollen, a full frame of capped honey, and I had an empty frame and 1 frame of capped brood. Now, normally when you pull a nuke, if it was for like sale or something, you want 3 frames of capped, you know, capped brood. This nuke isn't for sale. It's really just a home to keep this queen for now. I'm gonna be keeping an eye on this. The minute I have to relieve a hive at some point, I know I could always add to this. So I wanna give her room, I wanna give her resources. And yeah, this is a pretty weak nuke, don't get me wrong. Usually I try to pull good strong nukes. This is not a good strong nuke. I only have 1 frame of capped brood, and that's okay. And I did a couple shakes of nurse bees, so that's enough to keep that queen alive and start building out. I can help this nuke in the future. It's going to go in my notes as a watch, because right from the start it's weak. But our goal is not this nuke. Our goal is keeping the bees in that box. So, but this nuke, don't fret not, I will nurse this thing, and this will be a production hive by midsummer.